I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, July 18th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, real data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of what was a tiny little gale in the upper reaches of the far southeast Pacific. Really, that didn't do anything, and it's fading out. But a new gale is developing in the central South Pacific, moving off to the east, producing 26 to 28 foot seas, and offering perhaps some remote chance, mainly for South America, Central America, but maybe up into California. Let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start by looking at winds at jet stream level. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when they develop, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a push in the jet to the north, just like what we have there. Not a big push, but a little bit. And what this does is help create a clockwise flow aloft in the upper atmosphere and down at the surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, if it's deep enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, generate seas. Seas, if they're high enough, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. And swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So troughs in the upper atmosphere are what it's all about. They drive everything. So we have a little trough here trying to get some traction. We know from the wave models that something's happening here. Let's put this into motion. As we move into Monday, that trough pushes off to the east and pretty much starts falling apart. And by then, it's over. We end up in this kind of a zonal flow, no troughs. And then as we get into Wednesday, if anything, the jet starts falling south. That's a ridge, and a ridge effectively helps build high pressure aloft. And in this case, this ridge is, the ice line's right around 63 south. So it's pushing over the ice line into producing an area with no open exposed waters and nothing really to help support gale formation. Then we get into Friday, Saturday. There's some sort of a weak trough forecast under New Zealand. Yesterday, it was much more pronounced. The models are very unsure on what's going to happen in this area. As we get into Sunday and Monday, then maybe a better trough starts developing with 130 plus knot winds pushing up to the north. This is Sunday night into Monday over the southeast Pacific. That looks like it's capable of supporting gale development. So we'll keep our eyes on that. But that looks like the best possibility, but it's also a week out, so the odds are pretty low. Next up, we're looking at surface level pressure, surface level winds. As we know, there's some sort of a gale here in the southeast Pacific generating 40 to 45 knot southwest winds, getting some traction. And that's supposed to build while pushing east into midday Monday and then into even Monday evening and early Tuesday, producing some seas. The cutoff for Southern California is like 118, 117 west over here. So the gale pretty much fades out before it even moves out of the Southern California swell window. So maybe some hope there. Then our ridge starts building. You can see high pressure here, winds pushing to the south, of no interest. A little gale is forecast under New Zealand as we get into Thursday, Friday. This area was supposed to blow up yesterday. Here we go again. Another like mini gale developing 45, almost 50 knot winds. And then continuing off to the east as we get into Friday night and Saturday, building with 40 knot winds aimed north. That's offering some hope. And then that kind of fades out on Sunday. Maybe some sense of it trying to redevelop in that trough that sits over here on Monday. Hard to say. All this is very dynamic. From one run of the model to the next, there's wild variation, so nothing is for sure. But I'd say we'll know better as we get into about Wednesday or Thursday of this week, and then things will settle down. We'll see what's actually going to happen. All right, so now let's go back in time. We're looking at the wave models. This is the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. A small gale developed southeast of New Zealand last Saturday, Sunday. Tiny gale. Swell from this system has already hit Hawaii and is all but fading out now. Tiny little bits of this energy are supposed to reach into California on Tuesday. We're talking a foot or less at 16, 17 seconds. So not a prolific swell producer. And you're just looking at the wave model. You can, there's just really not any large expanse of fetch. Then on Thursday of last week, a new gale developed southeast of New Zealand with seas in the 28 to 30 foot to, here, we'll pull this up a little bit here, 31 foot range right there. So a little bit of swell could result. Most of it aims sort of more off to the east and the northeast. So a little bit, tiny energy again, like 1 foot up into at 17 seconds for Hawaii. Most of this aimed towards the U.S. West Coast, Central and South America. That system faded out as we got into Saturday. A new system developed as we pull into Sunday the 18th. Most of this all aimed southeast to east, and then we get to current time. Now let's go take a look at the forecast model. And here we are. Winds or seas building as we get into midday Monday to 32.6 feet right there, and maybe 34 feet Monday night, and holding into Monday evening. And then off into Tuesday, still in the 34 foot. This is actually an upgrade from previous runs of the model, and down to 28 feet as it pushes out of the California swell window. So maybe some real south-angled swell for California, but mainly focusing on Central and South America. Then we move on into Thursday, Friday. We know there's some gale activity. Here we go, southeast of New Zealand. Tiny area of 32-foot seas. That system is out of the California swell window, so we're not even going to consider that. This system was supposed to be much stronger as we moved into Saturday, but like 2 runs of the model make a big difference. Still, what is that? 29, 30-foot seas, down to about 27 foot, something like that. Lifting north as we get into, we're almost a week out now, and then maybe some secondary fetch building over the Southeast Pacific. So in general, a pretty, I don't want to say it's slow, but yes, definitely the summer swell production season appears to be backing off after what was a prolific run of not big surf, but steady surf, would seem like for weeks. Now we're falling back into a hole. Looking at wind swell as we get into Monday, a little bit of fetch off California, the typical deal, high pressure 1032 millibar high in the Gulf of Alaska. Heat low inland creates a gradient, produces north winds at 20 to 25 knots. We're talking probably waist high wind swell, something like that, maybe chest high for California. Trades pretty solid over pushing into Hawaii and Guillermo here. We'll get into that in a second. But trades relative to the Hawaiian Islands producing east wind swell at exposed breaks. Pretty much the same deal as we get into Tuesday. Minimal wind swell for exposed breaks in North and Central California. Even a better, look at this, a broad fetch of east winds up to 20 knots over the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, again now building fetch 20-25 knots, building wind swell for California. Same deal for Hawaii. Maybe the worst of it, the best of the wind swell. Now still holding into Thursday. Again, building wind swell for California on Thursday. Same thing on Friday. Just the machine really sets up good here. Saturday, same deal. Maybe wind swell fading a little bit for California, but remnants. Is this remnants of Guillermo here? Yes, you can see I'm going back, just sort of running in time here. We're in Saturday. Remnants of Guillermo interacting with high pressure, producing maybe an enhancement, a bump in the trade wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands as we get into Saturday. And then pretty much the same thing, even as into Sunday. It really is looking now like wind swell is the name of the game, even as we get into Monday a week from now. Here's a quick look at Guillermo as we get into Monday, I mean, winds down to 35 knots. Even back here, the max it was I think in the 50 knot range. No fetch really aimed at California, all driven by high pressure up here, driving Guillermo straight off to the west towards Hawaii. But winds 25 knots, 30 knots. I mean, really nothing discernible other than, just it'll add a little bump to the wind swell heading towards Hawaii, but no real swell production expected from Guillermo. So rainfall, we're talking the Sierra, and I think even Southern California on Sunday had some pretty good rain. The Sierra up Pacific Crest Trail in the Southern Sierra, pretty good amounts of rain were reported, and more of the same is expected on Monday. No snowfall though. Snow level's really high, in the 15,000 foot range. And basically holding that way for the foreseeable future. Temperatures not too bad on the Pacific Crest Trail and John Muir Trail, in the 50s to 70s, that sort of thing. Rain expected through today, but then it dries out and dry for the foreseeable future after that. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian Oscillation and, of course, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. As usual, we like to start by looking for the presence of the active phase of the MJO. The MJO is this periodic weather oscillation. It has two phases, an active and an inactive phase. If the active side is on one side of the planet, the inactive side is, on the other side of the planet. They rotate around, opposed to one another. When the active phase is moving over the Pacific, it helps to reduce trade winds. It's like a low pressure system, and it imparts energy to the jet stream, and a more energetic jet stream therefore feeds storm production potential both in the North Pacific and the South Pacific, though the correlation is better in winter months over the North Pacific. All right, so what we're looking at here is wind speeds, data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. Well, this is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. There's the equator. That's New Guinea there. We're looking at the arrows. The longer the arrow, the bigger the arrows, the stronger the wind. So east trade's pretty strong in the East Pacific, pretty strong over the Central Pacific, and really strong over the West Pacific, the Kelvin wave generation area. That is when the active phase of the MJO is over the West Pacific. It can dampen these trade winds, and if not, actually reverse them, taking warm water, the reds here that you see, and start pushing them off to the east, not on the surface, but underneath the equator, like a ball, a wave of warm water. That's known as a Kelvin wave. When the Kelvin wave, if it's strong enough, has enough momentum, it reaches the Galapagos and Ecuador, can erupt to the surface, create a pool of warm water there. Successive active phases of the MJO, if they're strong enough, can create successive Kelvin waves that then can shift the balance of water temperature on the surface from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, creating warm water here south of California and south of the United States, can dramatically change the jet stream pattern, push a lot of precip into the United States, especially the West Coast during winter months. So we're very active in, that is the hallmark of El Nino, of course, driven by the MJO. All right, but we're not looking at the actual wind speeds, it's the anomalies. Difference from normal for this time of year. Yeah, we see strong east trades here, but you're looking at these arrows here. They're, a little bit stronger than normal, but not too bad. Same deal over the Central Pacific, a little bit stronger than normal. But in the Kelvin wave generation area, very strong out of the east. So this suggests that we're in the inactive phase of the MJO, not the active phase. So not a favorable regime for storm production. Let's go take a look at the forecast. Actually, what have winds been doing the past 5 days? Okay, well, here's a chart. So South America, Central America, Mexico, Hawaii, 0 is the equator right there. Philippines, New Guinea, Kelvin wave generation area from, there's the date line right there. So 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator to about 135 east, right in there. Okay, you see, so this is the east-west component of the wind anomalies. The blues are easterly anomalies, stronger than normal, indicative of the inactive phase of the MJO. So you see east anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation on the 13th of July, the 14th of July, bigger over the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th of July, filling the Pacific, indicative of the inactive phase of the MJO taking over the Pacific, and therefore not favorable for storm production. Here's the forecast for the east-west component of the wind over the entire planet. All right, this chart is the entire planet. The date line runs right up the middle here. Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific starts about here, 135 east, right up the chart, to about 170 west. That's the area we're interested in. So right, this area is past performance. The blues are easterly anomalies, which is synonymous with the inactive phase of the MJO. You can see the inactive phase was very strong here, like the 13th through the 16th of July. Appears to be weakening some today, that is the 19th, and then is expected to move out of the Kelvin wave generation area at the end of the week, the 26th of July, with weak west anomalies trying to fill maybe half of the Kelvin wave generation area, so maybe a slightly better area to support storm production, but not markedly strong. And you get the very much the sense that east anomalies have been in control since the end of June, all of July, and are going to continue through the end of July. So at least the inactive phase in control. Let's look further out. All right. Outgoing long-wave radiation. This is not winds. This is the amount of cloud cover over the planet as compared to normal. All right. The blues mean more cloud cover, negative anomalies, less sunlight reflecting off the ocean surface. This is synonymous with the active phase of the MJO. And we see perhaps the building, South America there. There's the Galapagos, Central America, Hawaii, the equator right there. Australia, New Guinea, date line right there. So Kelvin wave generation area roughly in that area. So the active phase is supposedly starting to build today, taking over the Kelvin wave generation area 5 days from now, more or less holding 10 days from now, and then fading 15 days from now per the statistic model. The dynamic model, here, we'll sort of keep the statistic model, the final frame in there too. The dynamic model, like the GEFS model, suggesting a stronger and more prolonged active phase of the MJO setting up, and that's exactly what we want to see. Next up, phase diagrams, a more detailed view of what we saw in the previous charts. This is the statistic model. This is the dynamic model. This is a spatial depiction of where the active phase is and how strong it is. The MJO, active and inactive, move from the Indian Ocean, west-east from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, over the West Pacific, over the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. Where the heavy dot is where the active phase of the MJO is, and the further that dot is away from the circle, like that little bit, the stronger it is. And when the heavy dot is like out here, anywhere out here in the outer reaches of this chart, it's very strong. So we'll say a very modest active phase of the MJO over the maritime continent that's like Bali today. And the forecast track 2 weeks from now has it over the West Pacific and pretty weak, per the statistic model. The dynamic model, pretty much showing the same thing, weak active phase 2 weeks from now over the West Pacific. So at least there's some hope as we get into the next 2 weeks. Upper level model, this is showing dry and wet air, same deal. The active phase of the MJO being a low pressure system promotes wet air. Oh, and this is a 40-day view. There's South America, Central America, the equator right there. Okay. New Guinea, Philippines. So Kelvin wave generation area roughly here. Active phase of the MJO moving into the Kelvin wave generation area. Inactive phase, dry air, moving over South America today. And you can see the active phase fully in the Kelvin wave generation area on July 23rd, making its way across the Pacific and exiting the Pacific on the 17th of August. And then the inactive phase in earnest start setting up, towards the end of this model, let's say the 22nd through the 27th of August. So the next couple of weeks may be a good opportunity for storm production, at least in the southern hemisphere. The 1 month CFS model. Now this paints the picture pretty well, okay? Again, whole plan on one chart. The date line runs right up the middle here. Kelvin wave generation area, West Pacific starts right about here. So between here and maybe here is our main area of focus. California is like at 120 west over here, and Ecuador about 80 west. So over here you can actually kind of almost see the seam of where that would be. Now you can see the this dotted dark heavier line. This is the inactive phase of the MJO moving from west to east. Today over the date line, moving out of the Kelvin wave generation area into the East Pacific over the next week, let's say, while the active phase, the solid, not the dash contour, the solid contour, and the oranges and reds are west anomalies, the blues are east anomalies. So east anomalies in control today, but west anomalies trying to build, you can see they just follow the active phase across the Pacific from the next 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks, and then they're out of the Kelvin wave generation area. This is the important part here, because this is in the Kelvin wave generation area. When the active phase is there, that's where the energy gets imparted into the jet stream and helps feed the storm track. So the next 2 to 3 weeks, pretty good opportunity for maybe some modest enhancement to storm production. And then as we get into early parts of August, then you see the blues here, easterly anomalies setting up in the Kelvin wave generation area, and the storm machine maybe backs off again. And then finally, the 3 month CFS model. We don't believe a model a week out, much less 3 months out, but this model actually does pretty good. All right, you can't see it here. Maybe I can pull this. There you go. Date line running right up the middle here. Okay, Kelvin wave generation area starts roughly over here. You can almost see the edge of it. And this is the area between 170 west and 135 east. Now, that's what we're interested in. This is past performance here. You look at the forecast, one clear thing is apparent right here. The blues are easterly anomalies, the yellows are westerly anomalies, a massive easterly anomaly signature forecast for the date line in the eastern half of the Kelvin wave generation area starting mid-August and onward. Right, we're going to overlay the MJO. But for right now, here the solid red contour is the active phase of the MJO with westerly anomalies forecast building over the Kelvin wave generation area today through about August 15th, something like that. Then a weak kind of mixed pattern, inactive phase, but still westerly anomalies hold on. They give way maybe later August, early September. And then a stronger active phase forecast, but notice westerly anomalies only make it to, well, hang on, we'll do it starting right about there, and we'll just draw the line up to about maybe 160 east, so about halfway through the Kelvin wave generation area. This area of easterly anomalies is a little bit troubling. Let's go look at the low pass filter. So this is the low pressure, high pressure bias thing. Tendency in the atmosphere. All right, the dotted contour is the high pressure bias, the solid contour, the low pressure bias. Think of this as La Nina and this is El Nino. And going back in time, this is last April. No, I'm sorry, this past April, May, June. High pressure in control of the Kelvin wave generation area, La Nina, right? Today, that pattern still backed off, limited to maybe the area over California with the low pressure bias. It tried to move almost to the date line, but not quite. But now is already in retreat. The high pressure bias by early September, late August, supposed to take over almost the bulk of the Pacific with two contours setting up. That's what's driving these blue anomalies, the east wind anomalies, and this effectively is saying the return of La Nina, a weaker version of it, only 2 contours versus 4, and we might have even been higher that in the depth of last winter. So let's say a half-strength La Nina as we get into October, if you believe a model that far out, but it seems pretty reasonable that that's the case. And with that, let's go talk now less the MJO, more the El Nino, La Nina thing. We're going to start by looking what's going on in the ocean. That can give us some hints as to whether we're moving towards El Nino or La Nina. Subsurface ocean temperatures. We're talking on the equator from to south to north across the Pacific. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. These little lines here, these are the anchor lines on the TAA buoy arrays, those buoys strung across the equator, used for monitoring El Nino. The X's are sensors on the anchor lines. The sensors are temperature sensors. They grab data from all these points, beam it up to a central processing facility in Maryland, I think. NOAA applies a model to it, and that fills in the gaps. And what you see is the 29-degree isotherm. That's centigrade. That's pretty warm water. Over in the far West Pacific, there's the date line right there. Okay, the 28-degree isotherm, it's at about 160 west. That's where it's been. So it's holding about steady, trying to actually move even a little bit east of there, suggesting warm water trying to move off to the east. The 24-degree isotherm, it kind of cut off a week or two ago, but now it's back pushing into Ecuador. That might have as much been a model anomaly, because you notice there's some pretty big gaps here where there's none of these little X's. So the model has a hard time sort of, you know, it can vary. This is not exactly precise. This is model data, but it's an attempt to get a sense of what's going on. It's not the actual temperatures, though, that matter. It's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of the year. You can see here in the West Pacific, 1 degree centigrade, that's, what is it, 1.59 degrees Fahrenheit above normal temperatures in the West Pacific, and then normal to slightly above normal temperatures the whole way across the Pacific, with 2-degree anomalies pushing into the East Pacific. So there's a Kelvin wave somewhere along here, probably fading out, and there's 2 previous Kelvin waves we were tracking pushing into the East Pacific, and they're likely fading. We're kind of watching this pool of cool water here, see whether typically when you get like a start of La Nina, cool water will start building and then magnify as it rises up and take over this area. We're hoping that's not going to happen, but it's entirely possible that it could. Looking at another model here, this is a higher res version using the same data. It suggests actually cool water is already setting up in the East Pacific. We're going to see some other data that sort of supports that. So maybe what we saw before was at best the optimistic view. This suggests a Kelvin wave here pushing east, but fading fast. Remnants of 2 previous Kelvin waves dying in the far East Pacific. Next up, we look at sea height anomalies, all right? So this is the equator right here. This is the date line here. That is kind of hard to see, but that's South America, the Galapagos right there, Central America, Hawaii up in there, okay, New Guinea there, Philippines there. This is the height of the ocean. JSON-3 satellite data. You take the waves out, you take the wind waves out, you take the tides out, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? -5 centimeter anomalies here, now setting up west of the Galapagos. Also another pocket here. This was all pockets of above normal anomalies even 3 or 4 days ago, suggesting that cooler water. I noticed below normal anomalies here off of Central America and up along Chile and Peru as well, suggesting you almost can see it, the cool triangle trying to set up, though that this is height anomalies, not actual temperatures, but you get the general sense that something is moving in the direction that we don't want it to be moving in. Next up, upper ocean heat temperature anomalies, all right? So the whole Pacific Ocean, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, time going back August, fall of last year, the building La Nina, the blues, colder than normal temperatures, building in the East Pacific, warm water all shunted off to the west, driven by stronger than normal trades in control. That's a La Nina pattern. Then all of a sudden, magically in March, the cool waters receded as the active phase of the MJO woke up, tapped this warm water, pushed warm water to the east in the form of one Kelvin wave pushing east, a second Kelvin wave pushing east, a third Kelvin wave pushing east in June, all making it to the far East Pacific. But now you get senses here that things are slowly starting to dissipate. The heat from these Kelvin waves are over, and it seems like maybe stronger than normal trades and upwelling are starting to occur again. Upper ocean heat anomalies for the area from the dateline to a point almost to Ecuador, maybe the Galapagos, we'll say. You can see back in August 2020, temperatures, this is the upper 300 meters of the ocean, much colder than normal into November, December, and then the first Kelvin wave started making its transit across the Pacific. The balance of temperatures increased, but then you see slowly fading, and now temperatures starting to fall negative again. All right, so let's go talk sea surface temperatures. We've talked the MJO thing. We've talked subsurface temperatures, but what's going on at the ocean surface? That's what really matters, because it is evaporation, warm water evaporating, that helps fuel the jet stream. All right, so right now, here's South America, Central America, Mexico, Baja, there's Hawaii, Galapagos, you can see them right there. The reds are above normal temperatures, sea surface temperature anomalies. For this time of year, temperatures are warmer than normal off of Ecuador right there, the Galapagos. But you see this building pocket of cool temperatures. It's only on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's what matters. This is the Nino 1.2 region here, off of Peru and Ecuador. And then the Nino 3.4 region starts south of California, 120 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, out to about the dateline. You can just look in this area here and you see temperatures cooler, the blues cooler than normal, little pockets of warming, but what was a much warmer signal appears to be moving in the cooler direction now, either by cold water coming up from depth or the inactive phase of the MJO moving over this region, making stronger than normal trades and causing upwelling. Sea surface temperature trend. Now this actually looks a little bit optimistic. You see the reds are warming here off of Ecuador and the Galapagos, continuing little pockets of cooling, sort of a mixed bag, but the balance will give it towards warming. It was much cooler here about 5 days ago, and it was not looking good. Now all of a sudden we're sort of in a return, so hard to just sort out what's going on. This is pretty noisy, but we'll call it holding neutral for now, maybe warming a little bit, but not much. And then the backed off view. You see generalized warming off of Peru, pretty good warming off of Ecuador here. This is the Nino 1.2 region. It's pretty noisy. But in the Kelvin wave generation area, in the Nino 3.4 region, from 120 west out to right here, you see it's probably more cool than warm, or we'll say neutral. Over here is the Kelvin wave generation area. Lots of warm water there, but we need a strong active phase moving over this water over this area to take all this warm water, start pushing it east. We suspect that's not going to happen anytime soon. The Nino 1.2 sea surface temperature index today, we're 169 thousandths of a degree below normal, a tenth and a half of a degree below normal. You notice, over the past multiple months, in that region, we only got to above normal for each one of these is a week. So 1, 1 week above normal, and that was it. Everything else has been below normal. Now, this is not the super definitive region, but it sort of gives you a sense of what's going on in the East Pacific. The Central Pacific, the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region, temperatures have been above normal since May 17th. We were up to about 0.33 degrees above normal, but since July 5th, we have been on a steady downward trend. Today, only 81 thousandths of a degree above normal right here, so a little bit less than a degree above normal. We're not negative, but we're certainly not positive either. Hold this in your mind. So let's say 1/10 of a degree above normal, because we'll talk about the forecast in a minute. And then let's go take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index. We've talked about the subsurface ocean, what's going on down low, and that helps drive what's going to happen at the surface. We've talked about the ocean surface over the equatorial Pacific. Now, what's the atmosphere doing up above all that? Is there sufficient evaporation, or is there so much cooling that it's muting evaporation and promoting high pressure? That is, when ocean temperatures are cold, that cuts off evaporation and high pressure builds over. All right, so we're looking at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, which is roughly the Indian Ocean, and Tahiti, which is roughly the West Pacific. When the index is positive, that means pressure is higher over Tahiti. When the index is negative, that means pressure is lower over Tahiti. Today, it's positive 8.80, but notice we were up to 37.86 a couple of days ago, and just looking back over the past month, there's been nary a negative reading at all, suggesting at a minimum, just eyeballing it, I'd say, well, that looks like the inactive phase of the MJO has been traversing the Pacific. Takes about 4 to 6 weeks for any phase of the MJO to make it from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. So that sort of fits the model pretty good. 30-day average, it averages 30 days of values of the daily contribution. Today's value, 12.32. You can see it's been steadily rising. We probably are in the active phase back in June, moving to the inactive phase, and we're probably pretty close to it peaking out. We know just from looking at the models that the active phase is now starting to build. So we would expect this to start falling pretty soon. The 90-day average, this is your El Nino La Nina indicator, just slightly above normal, 5.74. And you can look back. Yeah, we've been as low as 1.35 when was that? In late June. We're up a little bit, but nothing that's clearly indicating La Nina yet. If we were up around 10, that's when we start getting worried. All right, the 30-day SOI graphed out. Back in 2019, we were in El Nino, negative values, and then in April of 2020, you can see the index just steadily started rising. The inactive phase of the MJO, these upward spikes, much stronger than the active phase of the MJO, the downward spikes. So that pushes everything up in positive. Our peak value about 20 or 21 in the peak of La Nina. Then we've been falling since March or so, but now look at this inactive phase. That's a pretty solid inactive phase, maybe suggesting the return of La Nina. And then finally, the sea surface temperature forecast for the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region. So remember before we said actual temperatures were probably about 1/10 of a degree above normal. This model suggests, dead even. So this is biased, maybe a little bit on the low side. The uncorrected version, that's what this is, suggests temperatures falling. This is mid-July, July 15th, falling to about 1 degree below normal in mid-October, and then slowly building into January to maybe 3/4 of a degree below normal, and then up to nearly normal as we get into April. The corrected version of that suggests temperatures maybe only 3/4 of a degree below normal. And if that's where we end up, somewhere between there and 1/2 a degree below normal, that's not so bad. That's, pretty typical actually for a 2-year La Nina double dip La Nina sort of pattern. But still cooler than normal. The colder waters, of course, not supporting storm production. And, indicative of no significant Kelvin waves in flight. So for right now, tiny swell is past Hawaii, maybe moving towards the U.S. from a tiny gale under New Zealand. Maybe a little bit of secondary energy from that is redeveloping now. Maybe some south-angled swell for California beyond that. And then another gale of some sort forecast developing southeast of New Zealand over the coming 5 days. Very unknown as to how strong or weak it will be. We're probably not betting a lot of money that it's going to be any sort of a barn-busting system. But at least some swell potential from the southern hemi on tap. Otherwise, wind swell for sure for points north of Point Conception and for the Hawaiian Islands for the coming week. And then looking further out long term, it looks like the dreaded double dip La Nina is on the way. And of course, though, last year we were in a strong La Nina, and we didn't have a lot of surf, but we did have a whole lot of surf. It was concentrated in about a 5 or 6 week window. It was off the charts. So that's not to say that if you're in La Nina, there's not surf, but when it comes, you better grab it. You better make the most of it. Don't expect it to be a long, ongoing swell event when they happen. They're short, they're sweet, and make the most of it. At least that's the strategy looking right now in the depths of July for what might be happening in December and January. So we're talking 6 months out. So take that all with a grain of salt. All right, that's our video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. If you have questions, comments, write some comments in the down below. We try to respond to them relatively quickly. We have some good discussions. Also, hey, good to see Beat a Pumpkin the other day. So ran into him in town. He's a longtime follower here, and it was good to actually put a face to a name, to a handle for a change. Nice guy. Good meeting you. And also, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, you can do that just below. Ring the bell. If not, go to stormsurf.com. All the data that you saw tonight is available there. And you can also get the link to the video. As soon as we post the video, we post on the top of every page of stormsurf.com the link to the video so you can watch it at your leisure. All right, thanks for watching. We'll do this again next week, same time, assuming our computer cooperates. We had some problems this week. This is actually the second time we built the video. Yesterday was not a good day for us due to computer technical errors, but we got a new computer coming maybe about a week or 2 out, and then we'll be on a much more stable platform. All right, thanks for watching. Go surfing, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Take care.